Good afternoon, listeners and viewers. Welcome to New Style Radio, where we're having a special program today, all to talk about coronavirus and the COVID-19 vaccine. My name is Tony Kelly, and I must give thanks to my colleague here on my left. That's Soca Master, otherwise known as Mr. Sylvester, and also Mr. Philip Murphy, who both collaboratively invited me to come and do this show, this special show about our health is our wealth, so to speak, in terms of the vaccine. Okay? There are other guests in the studio. I just mentioned who they are. They all will have a chance to speak, and then some people are going to call from wherever they're based in the city. So we have on this program today Dr. Matthew Pajuri, who is a consultant public health specialist, Wade Lynn, the famous Wade Lynn, CBE, CD, and DL. And we're also having Beverly Lindsay, Honorary Doctorate OBE, CD. She'll be phoning in, and former Vice Lord Lieutenant of the West Midlands. Maxie Hayes, a community activist, MBE. And as I said earlier, Erwin Sylvester, and of course, last but no means least, Philip Murphy. Now, while we wait on Dr. Matthew to phone in, I'm just going to set the scene as to why we thought it was necessary to have this particular program. You'll notice it's an abundance of men. There's only one, as we would say in Jamaica, one dega woman on the show, and that's Beverly Lindsay. Exactly a week's time is International Men's Day. And we men on the whole, men are into denial. Men are not in touch with their feelings. Men are not in touch with their emotions. Men, like the ostrich, the largest bird on the planet, at the first sign of danger, bury their head in the sand, hoping the problem will go away. Now, listeners and viewers, we know the problem doesn't go away. And I was one of those men who hadn't been to my doctor for 8 years before I had to go and find out that I had type 2 diabetes. I'll mention that straight off. So there is an abundance of men, but that's deliberate. But in terms of people phoning in, we want men and women to phone in. The phone line is 0121-270-2559. So we do want people to phone in with their views and thoughts about the whole issue of the coronavirus, which has been around since December 2019. That's why it's called COVID-19, because it first came into being in China in 2019. We're still unsure. The debate's still out there. The jury's still out as to whether it was transmitted by bats or whether it was a lab in China which caused it to happen. But while we're waiting on Dr. Pajura to call in, I'll give you a few facts and figures so you get an understanding of where we are in terms of this COVID-19 and the coronavirus. Okay? It says here, and some of these I got off the internet, and I'll be telling you which websites to go to. It says here, why are more men dying? That's one headline that was there. Men are much more likely to die from coronavirus. And then the question again asks why. And then there's another one saying men are considerably more likely to die from COVID-19 than women. Twice as likely according to age standardized figures. And that's the whole issue of why us men need to talk. We need to get out of our comfort zone. We need to be able to discuss it with our partners, with our whoever, uncles and grandfathers and our sons and so on. Our health, we need to have that discussion. Hence, with Mr. Philip Murphy and Soca Master arranging for this to happen today. Let me just mention one other thing before we have the call coming through. The coronavirus has been around for years. It's not a new thing. There was the SARS virus, which was a severe acute respiratory syndrome. There was also the Middle East respiratory syndrome. These are viruses that have been around. This particular one is new. So that's why it's been given the name COVID-19. So things like flu and the common cold, those are actually SARS viruses. Those are viruses which have been around and so on. But this particular one is one which has really disseminated the world, the pandemic, and killed so many people. And I'm going to give you latest stats, which says here, as of the 11th of November, yesterday, which was Armistice Day, The U.S. Johns Hopkins University said there were 5,073,702 deaths. Now, that's an estimate, because some people will reckon it's much more than that. And, of course, in terms of infections worldwide, there have been 251 million infections. However, this is an important stat to know. 7 billion people, 360 million, 381,000 people have received the vaccine worldwide. And our job here today is to try and encourage people, men and women, and young people who are hesitant, a bit reluctant, not wanting to take the vaccine, hearing all this sort of conspiracy theories, to know, and this is why we have a panel of people, all sitting on this panel have taken the vaccine. And as far as I know, they've also taken their booster, which comes after you take the 2 initial vaccines. So, has Dr. Pajuri, has he come on the line as yet? He's not on the line yet. I'll go on telling you a bit more facts while we wait on him to join us, because he's coming in by phone. He's not actually in the studio. He's a very busy consultant and can't make it to the studio here. I'll start off with another article. Most of us here are Jamaican. I know Soca Master is from Trinidad. That's why they call him Soca Master, you see. But I saw a stat earlier this week. Half the people who have died in Jamaica from COVID-19 had diabetes. So we need to understand straight away that one of the comorbidities, I know it's a big word, but one of the underlying factors for the whole COVID-19 is diabetes, kidneys, high blood pressure, which is hypertension, the same thing, strokes, being overweight, being elderly, getting on in age. And so those are some factors which cause us, but we must never forget the underlying thing about racial discrimination, which I'm sure some of the panelists will touch on. Racial inequality, systemic racism, which has also played its part in terms of how so many black people have succumbed to this terrible virus. Another thing I will mention, and I'll ask my guest speakers to touch on that, another thing I'll mention is our immune system. We as black people, if your immune system is weak or compromised, you're more susceptible or more prone to having the virus and then suffering badly from it. So I'm urging listeners out there, we've got to start eating healthily. Healthy eating in terms of fresh fruit and vegetables, you might still get the virus, but your body might be better able to counteract it. Because think of the body and a virus coming in, it's like it has its defense mechanisms. It sends its soldiers out. When any virus or bacteria enters the body, it goes into a defense mode and sends soldiers out to attack what it is that is causing the body to react to this. And this is why I'm saying to people, we need to eat healthily. We need to drink a lot of water, for starters. We need to cut out all the pop and the sodas and that sort of thing, and lots of starchy food. Yes, you do need carbohydrates or starchy foods, because that gives you energy. But the more vegetables you have in your diet and the more fresh fruits, that is what will build up our immune system. And alongside that, there's the issue of physical activity as well, which I'll touch on later on. For those who don't know, I tend to say physical activity. The same thing we're talking about is exercise. But some people rather say physical activity. Because when you say exercise, for some people it conjures up images that they're going to the gym. But I think I'll call a halt there, because we now have on the line Dr. Matthew Pajuri. Is that correct?
Hi, good morning. My name is Matt Peggery.
Hello, can you hear us loud and clear?
I can. How about yourself? Can you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you. You're our first guest on the line. We have 2 other people who are going to come in on the line, but you're our first guest because you have other appointments. You consultants are very busy. So I'll introduce you. You're a consultant public health specialist, and you're participating in a private capacity, not representing your employers, but welcome to the show here. You're no stranger, by the way, to New Style Radio, I'm told. You've been on here talking about public health matters in the past. So let me start by asking you, although the coronavirus has been with us for nearly 2 years come December, and it was believed that the virus would be under control by now, which it hasn't, that doesn't seem to be the case. What's your view on that? What's the evidence of it mutating and so on and getting out of control? Share with the listeners and viewers, please.
Okay, well, firstly, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be back. That's a very good question. I guess, first things first, with any pandemic, as history has shown us, there does tend to be a phenomenon, like basically different waves of the disease. A pandemic, by definition, that's why it's called a pandemic, occurs when a new type of infection somehow emerges somewhere, and because it's new, no one or hardly anyone in the world, no human, has any immunity against it. As you were saying, that the body sends out soldiers when it's attacked by an infection. With this one, it's brand new. There are no soldiers to send out. And if a bug has that characteristic, and on top of it can spread well, like this virus does, it can essentially start infecting pretty much across the whole world. So if you think of it, even if you control it in one area, chances are eventually it will come back, because unless you got it unless or until you have it under control in the whole population globally, essentially it's not going away. And previous pandemics have tended to be from a virus called influenza, flu. And if you look back throughout history, as I say, every flu pandemic we has had exactly that pattern. One big wave, followed maybe a year later by another wave, depending on where you are in the world, etc., etc. So I suspect, eventually, what will happen with coronavirus, it will be a little bit like the pattern we have with flu. So if you think of flu pandemics from the past, the same strains of flu are still around today, but they cause what we call seasonal flu. So they just, more or less kind of come over the winter, affect a smaller number of people compared to the pandemic, and tend overall to be less serious in terms of causing death and so forth, thanks to vaccines or previous immunity from being exposed to the infection in the past.
Okay.
You want me to talk about mutations briefly?
Well, I'm going to go on to the next question, because you clearly explained about the virus itself and the whole issue of the pandemic and where we stand with it. As we know, and it's a well-known fact, there are a variety of reasons why many individuals are extremely suspicious, hesitant, reluctant, sometimes even hostile to the whole issue of the virus and the vaccination. And we won't go into the conspiracy theories, we leave those out, but what would you say to people listening and viewers as to why are they so suspicious and hostile and hesitant and reluctant? And what would you say advising them to take the vaccine?
Okay. Well, in terms of the kind of belief around coronavirus, etc., I mean, I work on the front line and have many colleagues on the clinical front line. So for me, it's really never entered my mind that it's not happening, because, I mean, it blatantly is if you work in a hospital. In terms of the vaccines are... There's so many factors at play here. It's a complicated issue. So right from the beginning, when vaccines were very first invented, probably about 200 years ago, there have always been people who don't, who are a bit either don't trust it or don't like the concept about it. So what a vaccine does, essentially, is that phenomenon you were talking about earlier about the immune system sending out soldiers to defeat that attack. The vaccine essentially pretends to be that enemy, and therefore launches that attack from your body, and your body remembers that attack or that method, shall we say. So when the real enemy comes, it's prepared and it gets rid of it, essentially. So vaccines stimulate a natural process within the body, and right from the start, there are some factions, particularly in the Roman Catholic Church, for example, that thought this was unnatural, because we are recreating, stimulating a natural progress that up until now was only happening naturally. Then the other issue is around the ethics, really. So Vaccines protect the individual, obviously, but also a big reason for taking the vaccine is protecting others. So that does take some altruism and so you need to care about other people around you and, accept a small degree of risk, as with any medicine, in order not to protect yourself but others. And not everyone is happy to make that choice. Mm-hmm. Again on choice, there's a real interesting phenomenon around our perception as humans of risks, and how whether a choice is seen to be our own, a personal choice, versus a choice that is somehow imposed on us. So I'm sure you know many people like this in your everyday life, but one person might say, well, I won't have the vaccine, or I won't, I think this ban on smoking is ridiculous. I think, they won't be willing to do that. However, they'll be more than happy to drive at 100 miles an hour on a motorway. And the risk of crashing is so much greater than the risk of anything associated with the vaccine. However, in their mind, it's their choice. And so they're much more comfortable taking that risk, if that makes sense.
So tell me then, Dr. Pejuri, what's the benefits of actually taking the vaccine as opposed to not taking it? Which benefit weighs out which?
Well, in this case, it's fairly clear cut. So, as I was saying, with any medication, vaccines included, there are a number of possible side effects. So, the obvious pro, there's pros and cons. The obvious pro of the vaccine is you protect yourself, and you also protect others around you. Because if you're vaccinated, although you can still catch the virus and pass it on, it's the chance of that happening is much lower. And even if you do catch it yourself, either you won't be ill or you won't be as ill as you would have had you not had the vaccine. Mm-hmm. The cons are like with anything, kind of side effects and so forth. But if you look at the impact, the likelihood of severe illness, as you see people dying all over the place in the early phases, you look at the risk associated with the virus and the risk associated with side effects of the vaccine, and the balance is very, very clearly tipped, in my mind, in favor of the vaccine. I would rather have a side effect of the vaccine, or take my chance with a side effect of the vaccine, than take my chance with COVID any day.
Okay. Let me move a bit away from the vaccine now and talk about the issue of the wearing of the mask, or for want of a better word, the face covering. Why would you say it's still important, the times we're living in, and everyone in the studio here has on their face covering or their mask? Why would you say that is still important, that when you're in crowded spaces like on the bus or the train or the tube or wherever, you should actually be wearing your mask? Explain to the viewers and listeners the importance of wearing the face covering.
Sure. Well, there's a number of reasons for it, and as you probably know, the evidence around it, so the science behind it, was initially a bit controversial. Well, not controversial, but it was somewhat lacking in the beginning. That has changed very much. So it's very simple. The way viruses like coronavirus spread is through what we call respiratory droplets. So when someone coughs or sneezes, mm-hmm. or talks very loudly, sings whatever, tiny particles of fluid from your mouth enter the air and can either go straight onto something or someone who then touches it and puts it in their mouth, etc., or indeed sometimes stay in the air for a bit longer. So putting a mask on means that it doesn't stop that happening entirely, but it will essentially reduce that load of those particles coming away from your mouth and your face. Mm-hmm. And if enough people do that together, the total load of those particles is much lower than it would have been without wearing a mask. So it means that everyone in that space is essentially protecting each other by reducing that load. The other thing, as you said, in closed spaces, the big difference also to that load in the air, clearly, is whether you have ventilation or not. Obviously, if it's very well ventilated, all those particles are much more likely to, essentially fly away, whatever, not linger. Where it's not ventilated, clearly the risk is higher because they may linger. So that's why it's important to wear a mask, particularly in those environments.
Okay, thanks for that. Now I want you to explain to the listeners and viewers the difference between a modern vaccine, because this is very modern, just hot off the press, so to speak, in the last 18 months or so, and previous vaccines, because that's worrying a lot of people. Oh, this was developed in record time, rare. So how can we trust it? Explain the difference between this modern vaccine and previous vaccines, please.
Sure. Well, I guess just for accuracy, although it is brand new as a, how shall we say, as a medicine available to the public, general public, the technology, shall we say, or the method that the new vaccine uses has been under study for a number of years, actually, way before this pandemic. So I wouldn't call it brand new personally, although actually as a vaccine itself, as a product, it is brand new. So what we're talking here is it's a technique or a vaccine called messenger RNA vaccine, and it's very, very clever actually. So if I start with how traditional vaccines work, then it might be easier to understand how the new one works. So traditional, as I was saying, essentially you put a little bit of either you put a bug itself that's been killed or weakened. That's called a live vaccine. You put a weakened bit of bug in your system, and your immune system sends out its soldiers, as I said, defeats it, and remembers that defense, shall we say, for future attacks. It can be just a specific bit of the bug that is particularly important to it. So when the body recognizes it, it attacks that bit and therefore destroys the bug. So the messenger RNA uses that kind of the second concept in a sense, and essentially what it's trying to do is get a bit of that virus, a specific bit of it, that will make the body recognize it and attack it. But the way it does that, instead of injecting that bit, in the vaccine itself, it actually gets the technique involves essentially, for want of a better word, injecting into your own cell a fragment of DNA, which then makes your cell machinery produce that bit it by itself. So you're not injecting the actual bit, but you're getting your own cells to produce that bit of the bit of the bug. And remember, it's just a bit. It's not the bug itself. So there's no way you can infect anyone like that. It's literally just a tiny little portion.
I'm going to put you on the spot there. You mentioned a word which comes up a lot in conversations. You mentioned the word DNA. You didn't mention it in the sense of how I hear it out there in the community. By taking the vaccine, it will alter or change your DNA. Is that possible or not? Just cut to the chase with that.
No, not at all. So the way cells work is you have kind of like mini factories, shall we say, within them that produce material called proteins, and the proteins are the building block of everything in your body, pretty much. And the code for the various proteins is DNA. So on a regular basis, your cell will kind of, release its own DNA that goes into those mini factories and produces those proteins. When I say injecting a bit of DNA into your cell, that injected DNA, it's actually RNA, but very similar, goes to the factory, not to the cell, not to the cell nucleus where your actual DNA is. So it's a completely separate. Well, they use the same factory, shall we say, but they come from different places and go to different places. So no, it's categorically
all right.
possible.
Conscious of time here, and you have another appointment at 1. So we put that DNA theory to bed, and everybody in the studio is nodding as well.
You can bury it
in agreement. I'm going to put you on the spot in terms of fortune teller, clairvoyant, soothsayer. What would you say in terms of as a scientist, because you are in the healthcare profession as a consultant public health specialist, what's your take on where is this all going to end? Is it going to, you remember President 45 said it will just vanish, him and his nonsense, it will just vanish into thin air, just as how it came. What's your view on it in terms of how are we in the world going to cope with this in 2 years' time, 6 months' time, 5, 10 years' time? Is this something we're going to have to learn to live with?
Sure. Well, I can touch on that a little bit earlier. So, I guess first I'll start with the not so good news is it's not one of those, I believe, that will be eliminated. I think it is here for the long term. And I guess that the easiest parallel I would make, again, is with flu. So the flu pandemics, as we've seen throughout history, start off very much as a pandemic, but as time goes, as more and more people become immune, because either they've been infected and recovered, or had the right vaccine to protect them, there's essentially less of a reservoir for that bug, that flu bug, to attack, and the bug needs a human host to live in. So when it runs out of human hosts, eventually it can fizzle out. But it's near impossible, I would say, to have every human on the planet immune at the same time, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
So with flu, what happens is a bunch of people get immune, but say 2-3 years later, that immunity gets a little bit lower, and they become a new possible reservoir. So I suspect, if I was to predict, it will probably, yes, we will have to just live with it, like many other bugs. If you think about it, we've got flu, we've got the common cold, we've got diarrhea bugs all over, and I suspect it will be, like I say, a bit cyclical. So once the population becomes a little bit less immune, you'll see a bit more cases, etc., etc. But the key message, though, I think, in terms of, I think overall it's a positive one, because the real problem with the COVID at the beginning was that people were dying and getting really, really ill, and thanks to the vaccine, that is no longer the case. And you're absolutely right in your more generic messages around good health. Right. I wholeheartedly agree. All that you're advising on exercise, not smoking, physical activity, a good, healthy, varied diet, all of that will improve your body's response to anything, not just coronavirus. It will also improve how well the vaccine works. So it's every little helps, and I think we're really lucky. I mean, I'll be honest, I wouldn't say that the UK has had the best response to the pandemic compared to other countries. However, I do believe they got it right with the vaccine. They were one of the first countries to get the vaccine.
Let me sort of bring it to a close with your final thoughts. But before your final thoughts, I want to ask you about New Style Radio has a listenership which covers transmits to over 120 countries, believe it or not, and a lot of the listeners are African Caribbean. Is there any evidence, as far as you know, there you are calling from Manchester here in England, is there any evidence that the virus disproportionately affects people of color? And would you comment on this worrying aspect of the virus? Why should it impact on us as black people more than white people or so on? What's your view on that?
Yeah, so I think the simple answer is it's complicated. So yes, it does impact in a different way. You're more likely to have severe illness if you're from a black ethnicity, black skin color, but it's not because of the ethnicity per se. So unlike some of the diseases that have a kind of genetic component, so you might be more likely if you're from a certain ethnical background, that's not the case. The reason it's more common in black people is because other underlying conditions such as diabetes, heart problems, they're the main two, tend to be more common in the Afro-Caribbean population, and because there's more of those conditions as a population, they are more vulnerable to the virus. But as an individual, just being black doesn't mean you're more likely to get coronavirus or have a severe illness with coronavirus. If you don't have blood pressure issues or heart problems or whatever, like I say, the skin color per se doesn't make that difference. If a white person has got diabetes, lung problems, etc.
Well, let me put you on the spot there. What about health inequalities, disparities in terms of systemic racism within the black community?
Absolutely.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do, and I'm afraid to say that it is a true phenomenon. I'm sad to say it, still nowadays. There are big health inequalities along the lines of racial difference and so forth, but not just that. The disparities between rich people and poor people, and unfortunately, we live in a very unequal society still, and we all have to do our best to try and change that, in my view.
Right, Joe. Well, I'm going to ask you then, before I thank you for coming on the line, any final thoughts you want to share with the New Style Radio and Breakthrough TV listeners and viewers on this whole subject of the coronavirus and the pandemic and COVID-19 vaccine?
Sure. Well, firstly, thank you, and I guess I want to say it's really, really good and encouraging to just talk about these things, because there's so many everyone has an opinion on these things, don't they? And so it's really good to kind of air them, listen to all opinions, and you know, it's very important to do your own research as well and so forth. But as we know, it's personal. It can be fraught with kind of misinformation and so forth. So I guess the key message is, I would agree with yourself earlier, like the healthy lifestyle. If you can get the vaccine, that's your best chance of protecting you and others. And on the bigger picture, be good, etc. On that kind of whole equality, it's if we can be good to each other as humans, and eventually get good humans in power, hopefully there is hope for the future. But right now, it's not looking great, is it?
Right, that was well timed. It's now 1:00. Dr. Matthew Pajuri, we thank you very much for calling from Manchester and sharing with us from a health perspective as a consultant public health specialist, your views on where we as black people stand within taking the vaccine. To be or not to be, that is a question, according to one of Shakespeare's plays. I think it was Hamlet. Hamlet indeed. Right. Thanks very much for coming on the show. Pleasure to hear you, and I hope the listeners take on board some of the things that you had to say. I think at this point we'll just go for a break. Right. So that the program flows, we are expecting guests to call in, but in the meantime, sitting next to me is the Honorable Wade Lynn, who is a Jamaican Honorary Council representative representing the Jamaica High Commission, but he's Birmingham based. So anybody who has passport issues or issues to do with immigration or so on, the first port of call is Council Wade Lynn. Welcome to the show, Wade.
Thank you for inviting me on.
Indeed. One must make sure to give you your titles, CBE, CD, and DL. And also, I'll add one to that, Mr. Patty King. If any of you haven't tried his patties, you need to get down to Hockley, the Jewelry Quarter, to try them. That's a plug for you, Wade. Anyway, it's nice for you to come on the show. I've interviewed you before in New Style Radio Studios here about your journey in terms of and I'm going to leave it up to you to say it. But before I even go there, I know you're into physical activity because I know you like swimming and you've climbed up to the base camp up Mount. Listen to this, viewers. At Mount Everest, the base camp, he's actually climbed up there and planted the Jamaican flag up there. So Little Jamaica is there known there as well. But Wade, I'm going to just leave it open for you to tell the viewers where you stand with this vaccine, your thoughts on it, what you've been through in terms of your life. I know, but some of the viewers are new to this and don't know. So I'll leave it open-ended. You go ahead, please.
From my perspective, I'm going to tell you that I caught COVID. I almost died 4 times. And I'm here because of the effort of the NHS, the ambulance service, and also I was fortunate to go to the QE Hospital, who was a leading edge when COVID started last year. I can remember I visited my mum in Jamaica in February of last year, and I came back here, and I remembered the pandemic starting. And I can remember vividly that a church in Wolverhampton took what I call a hit with its parishioners and also the head of the churches. And it was news on Midlands Today and ITV News, and that was a stark reality of our community really getting hit. Now, they didn't mention the church, they didn't mention how many people had died at the thing, but I remembered that before as I class went into my deep coma, but I'll come about that later. So at that time, COVID was around in March, and it obviously, if we watch the news, it was in Italy and spreading around the world. I've since known that people that went on a cruise in the Caribbean, there was a particular ship and COVID was actually there. That was way back in December. But mine is a real journey, and if I could say that in my food factory, we adopted the COVID regulation and we still wear face masks now. I still carry a face shield every day. We do not take our face mask at all because we have a number of individuals that work in the company that may not have had the vaccine, and we have to protect them as well. Mm-hmm. So if anybody visited, We have screens around everybody's desk from the top of the desk to 1 foot above the ceiling. Every area in the factory has an air circulation that changes 3 to 4 times per hour.
Right.
So we bring fresh air in and we extract the old air out. We are fortunate that we haven't been severely hit with the number of staff being off with COVID, but various families have taken a personal hit. And for me, I've been there and I've survived it. And my journey was on the 2nd of April. I can't remember the ambulance driving, picking me up at home, taking me to the Curie Hospital. And I can't even remember making 6 phone calls to the people I love the most. The only phone call I can remember is I rang someone and says, please take the milk out the fridge. I'm not going to come home and it's going to go off before I come home. And my story is, at that stage, they put me in a coma. And I was in a coma for 5 to 6 weeks. I lost my physical ability. After 5 days, your muscle starts to disintegrate in the sense that you haven't exercised it. But I was fortunate that every 12 hours they turned me over from your back onto your stomach to take what they call the fluid off my lungs.
Okay.
So, the only fortunate thing I had, I do not suffer from diabetes, high blood pressure, and I'm not overweight. But in our black community, if you may have one of these 3 or more, you may, if you do catch it, may suffer. Now, at the time, I was in a deep sleep. I call it my big sleep. I had liver failure, kidney failure, heart failure, and I possibly may have had a stroke as well. So bearing in mind that the virus will affect the weakest part of your body. So if you do not want to take the vaccine, it's your personal choice, but you run a higher risk. I've survived to tell the tale, and I'm here possibly to save 1 or more people.
Here.
And that's where I'm coming from. So I've gone to the edge and I've come back.
Well, it's nice to hear that, because when I say nice, not what all you've been through, but for the doubters out there who say, there are people out there who still say there's no such thing as the coronavirus, there's no such thing as COVID-19. And you're living proof of somebody who has been to death's door and come back, and with a lot of prayers being said, because I remember when you were poorly at the time, and Monica Coke was keeping us informed and so on. So you're a prime example of somebody who is there on this crusade now to get the message out there. You can't get a better person than you, who has been there, done it, worn the T-shirt. And viewers and listeners need to hear your story loud and clear. Carry on, please.
I have the scars to prove it. So I have a little scar that they had to cut my throat to fit the feeding tubes in and everything else. So that my battle scar, as I call it. And you have to understand that the older community in here, we're very much old, will always wear a face mask because they value life.
Yes.
And they want to live a little bit longer. The younger people of this world and the people that feel that they are immune to this particular vaccine, that's their personal choice. And they don't want to be dictated by the science of, not the UK, of the world. Let's get it clear. So, you know, if you think it's just this country or America or China or wherever, what has taken place in the last 18 months was to develop a vaccine, and they then decided to say how other countries can develop the same vaccine. Now, listening to the gentleman before me, it's going to be around for a number of years. And the people that said, I don't need to take the vaccine, that's fine. You may not be able to travel abroad. Because if you want to go to the United States, you have to be double jabbed.
Yes.
Let's get that clear. So that's fine if you don't want to take it. The risk is out there. And I know what the other media is saying, the risk is high, but the risk is about 1 in 100,000 that you may have a side effect. And the question they always ask, have you had any fever, high temperature before you have the vaccine? The reason behind that, as the doctor would say, you will be given a small dose of the COVID vaccine. So if I could go back when you're a small child, you had a small dose of smallpox.
Yes. Polio.
What the smallpox did was to make your immune system heighten, so if you did catch the smallpox, it would fight it off. And it's the same process. And obviously the vaccines have been around for 200 years, so it's not a new thing.
Right. Yes. As our previous doctor actually said, and we homed in on that straight away during the ad break, how important it was to hear. Yes, it's been developed and made better since then, of course. What else would you like to the viewers and listeners to hear going forward? You come out of this, and here you are on this campaign trying to get people to be more sensible, take responsibility, and in a sense be less selfish. What else would you want to pass on to them in terms of the message, loud and clear, that they need to hear?
I think it's the people around you. Understand that. Now, you have to protect the older generation because they value life as they get older. They want to live another year, another month, another 10 years. Understand that. Now, if you go out and you look at the people wearing masks, they're going to be the older generation and the people of the Chinese community, because in their country, they've already experienced it. So those are the two key people. And also, you have to understand, in our community, we may have high-risk people that may have lupus and all of that. My auntie has lupus. We go out together, but she wears a face mask in public because she values her life and she doesn't want to catch it. So understand that. Now, the issue that you will have, the younger generation will be asymptomatic, which means that they will carry the virus but do not show any excessive
Signs or symptoms.
what you call side effects, high temperature, sneezing thing. My daughter recently picked it up and she said, I've only gone 3 places, Dad. Work, the underground and home. So you can pick it up anywhere. I think I might have picked it up because I might have touched something, and I always have a little sweet in my car that I have a little suck as I drive along. So it's as easy as that. But I look at all the people, all of us in this room, I have a face mask. Maxiel has a face mask on. And, you know, if you travel, whenever I go into shops, I wear a face mask. You might get looked at a little bit funny, but guess what? I'm saving my life, and I might be saving your life as well.
Why would you be looked at funny now? Because it's a weird, in the old, I shouldn't say the olden days, but back a few years ago, when you saw Chinese and the Koreans and so on in Birmingham or London or wherever, where you'd have a second look at them. But now, because it's sort of the norm and the expectation, nobody takes a second glance or second look, I would have thought.
That's correct. And for the listeners, don't assume it's going to go away. It's going to be around for a number of years, a bit like the flu that we currently have. And the last pandemic was in 1918, after the First World War, the Spanish flu, that spread around the world on the little cruise ships, the little sailing ships that went abroad. That's how the pandemic spread around the world. So after the First World War, when it finished in 1917, the Spanish flu spread around the rest of the world. So, you know, you have to tell the listeners this is a new way of life going forward.
Yes. Yes. That's good to hear. I'm conscious we were supposed to have somebody phone in, but they haven't as yet. But I'm also conscious of time as well. Is there any other parting words you'd want to give, Wade? Your story is there because it's on Breakthrough TV as well and elsewhere, where you have clearly outlined in far more detail than you will be able to today, because we have a number of other speakers lined up. But is there any parting words or parting shot that you want to give to listeners and viewers who are still especially hesitant and reluctant to take. First of all, they don't believe it exists, and those who are also hesitant and reluctant to take the vaccine. Try and convince them. Look down the camera and speak loud and clear.
For me, if you haven't taken the vaccine, and if you do get it and you go into hospital, you run a higher risk of dying in hospital without having the vaccine. Understand that risk you're running. And I know the people out there said, I'm prepared to take that risk. But if you watch the news like I do on a regular basis, the reporter reports on the people in hospital that haven't had the vaccine because it's that vaccine hesitancy. You are lucky to live in the UK where you have abundance of vaccine. The people in Jamaica who haven't got an abundance of vaccine, they're queuing up to take their first shot. Understand that you are very fortunate to be in a country with surplus vaccines. And if and when you do catch COVID, you cannot have the vaccine because at the moment when you are asymptomatic and you are heightened with the COVID, you cannot afford to get a small amount of the vaccine, which is a very small amount, which may push you over the edge. So whatever information that you have out there, the risk, you are taking that risk. But also, you are protecting your relatives and families. That is the key thing. Now, if children go to school, they may carry the vaccine back to their parents and possibly the grandparents. Understand that.
I'd also add, you mentioned Jamaica, and I'll mention Jamaica in a bit, but the continent of Africa, and these are facts, only 3% of the whole of the continent of Africa, which is made up of so many countries, have had access to the vaccine, while places like Canada are stockpiling millions of these doses. And the United Nations are saying this is ethically immoral. You should be passing on your surplus to countries that don't have it. And the same with Jamaica. It's a case of, here we are in Britain, we got Jamaican, wanty can't get it, and getty no want it. So here we are, we have the vaccine, it's free, and you're supposed to be taking it, and you still have people being reluctant and hesitant and saying, no, it's not for them. But I have to thank you, Wade Lynn, Honourable Council Wade Lynn, for coming and sharing with us your views on the issue, while we get ready now to bring our next speaker on and play the next track. But thanks very much for your contribution to our program here about the whole vaccination issue.
My pleasure, Tony.
You're welcome. The next track we're going to play is called Young, Gifted and Black. Welcome back. That was Bob Andy and Marcia Griffiths, Young, Gifted and Black. Next we have sitting beside me the well-known Maxie Hales, MBE. He's worked professionally as a social worker, a winner of multiple prizes for his many years of anti-racist work throughout not just Britain, but abroad as well. Has had the Prime Minister's Prize and an award from Reverend Jesse Jackson. And of course, he has his acclaimed autobiography, Taking It to the Max, which I urge people to go onto whatever website, and buy. Maxie, welcome to this special edition of New Style Radio's coronavirus and COVID-19 vaccine conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Philip. Recently you've been organizing some serious events, which I've had the pleasure of attending. None more important than this one. What I would like to do in my presentation is to look at the economics of COVID-19. And second part, I would like to look at the hesitancy of this and its starking facts that we have here. Let me just say this before I go on. I was attacked some time back on social media because I dared to say, when the Prime Minister had COVID, I dared to mention as a Christian person that we should pray for the Prime Minister. Who tell me if you go say that? And they attacked me, some of them attacked me viciously till I did behave badly, which is rare. And I had to apologize because you have to remember that you don't know who's out there. You got young people out there who look up to you as role models. But I was furious. I lost it. And 2 people told me quickly, take it down, Maxi, because that's not you. And all I was saying, and even my greatest enemy, I wouldn't wish COVID on them. And that's all.
Good
and I got that type of attack. Now, I've had all of the vaccinations and the booster
Well done.
and the annual full injection. And I'm an exercise freak, my wife and I. We exercise as no man's business because we feel guilty if we don't do that. And we try to eat sensibly and healthy. So let me just say, and before I go on, in France, the French. The French are very, very serious, determined people. If they strike, they strike. No, and they're not the type of people that like to fall in line with government orders. And at least 90% of the French population has actually, and elderly people over 65 have actually had the vaccination. So anyway, let me just start with the economics of it. And this is a source I got, which is quite frightening. The development of the many COVID-19 vaccines is unprecedented in history. Not only were they developed quickly in response to the global pandemic, but multiple vaccines were developed around the world in order to try and cut off the chain of transmission, hospitalization, and deaths. More than 21 COVID vaccines have been developed, including a further 194 that are currently undergoing clinical trials. In light of this, some have asked why there has been such a rapid development of vaccines in response to the pandemic when other lethal diseases haven't received the same amount of attention and urgency. The answer to this question lies in the economic inequalities embedded in our capitalist system that was cultivated through colonialism. Disregard any false notion that the vaccines are designed to destroy black people, because the stark reality is that the majority of people in Africa and parts of Caribbean don't have access to any vaccines and probably won't for years to come. Vaccines as a priority for getting Western countries back to normal. The vaccine development was spurred on by rapid investment by Western countries and China to end the cycle of lockdowns that largely hurt the economy. From the perspective of Western policymakers, the vaccines have to be developed because it would have been difficult for Western politicians to justify opening up and exposing significant parts of the population to a disease that we have yet to develop natural immunity to. Despite the global nature of pandemic, this has led to an oversupply of vaccines that has led to a delay in providing for many developing countries, particularly those in Africa. The UK, for example, ordered over 540 million doses in vaccine, despite having a population of 68 million. This vaccine hoarding has left Africa unable to vaccinate much of its population of 1 billion people, with 2.5% of people vaccinated, while the Caribbean has only 6 million out of 43.7 million people fully vaccinated. Currently, many countries in both regions are seeing a surge in infections and hospitalization as the Delta variant infects more people. This is all while up to 100 million vaccine doses in the West are set to go to waste by the end of 2021. The capacity for developing countries to create their own vaccine is there. Most countries in Africa and the Caribbean have launched successful vaccination programs against diseases such as Ebola and smallpox with their own sources. However, much of the COVID vaccines developed have been patented by pharmaceutical companies which have prioritized the sale of those vaccines to the West. Companies like Pfizer have refused to partner with the World Health Organization to supply the technology and knowledge through vaccine hubs, enabling countries in Africa and the Caribbean to manufacture their own vaccines. Instead, what we are seeing unfolding is a potential repeat of the 1990s AIDS crisis in Africa, was generated in part because pharmaceutical companies refused to share trivial drugs technology with African nations that struggled to afford to buy them. Let me just go into this. I won't take long, but
yes,
it's important. It's important to get this right. This is the hesitancy, why there is such hesitancy. Throughout 2020, COVID-19 ripped it across the world, devastating communities and disrupting livelihoods at an exceptional rate. In the Western world, one of the worst affected groups were Black communities. With the development of several vaccines around the world, it is hoped that aspects of this pandemic can be managed. However, concerns are growing about the lower rates around vaccines coverage in Black communities. Vaccine hesitancy is a feature present across sections of the Black world, and it raises many questions about the impact of marginalization, poverty, and the historical relationship of Black communities with the modern world created by Western imperialism.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there. Yeah. That article is a very well written article.
Yeah.
Where, if let's say listeners and viewers want to go and see it for themselves.
I just need to tell you, all right, and I'll skip that. But one of the things that frightens me in this article, which I have managed to cover, is that these people, many people who are skeptics of the vaccine, they are skeptics because the far right group, right, internationally, discovered that Black people were mainly the ones that are dying of this disease. And you know what they did? They sent around deliberately developed propaganda, sent it out to Black people and social media, and then Black people distributed for them without even knowing
right.
That was so let me say this now.
Yes.
Finally, let me just finish this.
And tell us where that article is based from.
Yes. Let me tell you this. The figures now. United Kingdom, fully vaccinated. Black African, 58.8% African have been vaccinated. Black Caribbean, 68.7%. Nigeria, 11%. Ghana, 2.6%. And Gambia, 7.1%. Sierra Leone, 0.6%. Republic of Sudan, 1.3%. South Sudan, 0.3%. Somalia, 1.5%, and it goes on. And then it goes here, finally, let me just say this. Jamaica, unbelievable, only have 10.2% of its population vaccinated.
And it's 3 million people that live in Jamaica.
It's 3+ million people. So it's all about the economics, the historical beliefs developed by these far-right groups, which is preventing a lot of our people from actually coming forward. I advise people to come forward as quick as possible to get this vaccine.
Wow.
Here are those figures that people...
yes, those are some very alarming statistics and figures you've presented to us, Maxi. And that just shows, and it brings back the whole issue of some of these countries. I'm sure the figures would be much higher if the vaccination was actually in this country, in their countries. But you spoke about the economics, very well covered there, Maxi.
You want the source?
Yeah, the source, please, because
source,
somebody's on the line now, I'm told.
this source is from...
Yeah? In a minute, she's going to
From a
phone.
black perspective, of course, this is the weekly voice, the voice, our voice.
The Voice newspaper, which comes out monthly. Right.
Yes, and its facts suggest vaccination is about developing nations returning to normal, not saving lives by Lyndon Mokasa.
So although it's not a recent edition of The Voice, they still can get online. This just came out.
On a monthly basis.
Yes, and this is the most recent one. Okay. So viewers, yes, that's very, very, it's not controversial. It's actually stating facts as it is.
Yeah.
And
Much more.
I don't think I've read that copy of The Voice as yet.
No, because I was listening to some of the comments here and I thought.
Yes,
Yeah.
but I'm aware of Africa only having 3% of people
God, it's
in the
terrible.
whole of the continent
And yet
being
they've got
vaccinated.
150
Million people, yes.
Of 68 million
Yes,
people in Britain.
yes.
And Britain has ordered 150 million. And
So-
they've got it sitting down.
All right, so let me end with you by asking now, you said earlier on that you've had both doses and you've had your booster. With all the conspiracy theories and everything else that's out there, as has your wife, what made you decide, well, this is the best course of action for you and your wife? What made you decide, yeah, I am having this vaccine? Because lots of conspiracy theories have been out there.
Yes. But you see.
And you mentioned you also have the winter flu jab.
Yes.
Yes.
I
Tell the viewers why.
I would like to say that I consider myself reasonably intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I've been having vaccines from I was a little boy.
Mm-hmm.
We used to have vaccine for measles,
Yes, and polio.
smallpox,
Chickenpox.
all different sort of things. So it's a tradition for me to be sensible. Why did they? And I've said to people, don't forget, all right, so we have some problems in the past. We were experimented, black people in America,
yes.
about syphilis, some stuff. Great wrong was done to us. But you can't live in the past like
yes,
that. They cannot single us out and inject us to kill all of us off as black people, because they would have to do it to their own people. That's how we put it.
Well, let me ask you one other question to wrap up.
Yeah.
Where does social media play a part in all of this? What's your view on social media, and how do they fit into this to try and get this message out there to young people and the ones who are anti-vaccine or hesitant or reluctant? How can social media play its part or not play its part? What's it doing or not doing?
Well, I think the very fact that people, far-right groups, have got the access to disseminate the type of garbage which I just told you about the conspiracy theory, that should be stamped on immediately, and the media can do that. Yeah, the pharmaceutical companies, they're no good to us, but I think that the media can play a crucial role. Instead of just, I noticed they get a few black people to come up and say, well, you must have the injection. Far more needs to be done. We are not out to reach communities.
Yes.
We are reachable communities.
Yes.
Enough is not being done. But I also blame the central and local government and also the leadership of the country. If you don't have leadership, this is down to leadership.
Yes.
If you don't have that sort of leadership, then you got problems.
I'd also add the need to take a leaf out of Soca Master and Philip Murphy's book, because they are presenting a program like this for the community, the black community out there, for people to listen and hear. And people should be phoning in with their questions. We have not a single call yet on 0121 270 2559.
Just before. Sorry.
Yes, you need to end now. Yes.
I've been to funerals. One yesterday, for instance, a day before yesterday, and very few people were wearing masks. I've been to the supermarket. I get so angry. Sometimes even out in the parks when I'm exercise, I put it on, and people look at me strange.
They think you're paranoid.
Yes, but it is very important for us to take the precaution and be grateful that we are in a country that we can be.
I agree.
We're given this.
I agree. On that note, Maxie, I thank you very much for your contribution. It's very well put, as usual. This is a man of the people. He knows how to say it loud and clear. We're going to go to another song before we get our next guest on. And it's a song to do with "Oh Doctor, I'm in Trouble." It's called "Goodness Gracious Me" by Rowan Atkinson. Let's hear that track now, please. Rowan Atkinson, "Goodness Gracious Me." We're back. That was "Goodness Gracious Me," and it mentioned lumbago and influenza and all the other ailments that we know about. And And I think we have a caller on the line wanting to contribute to the discussion. Could the caller come through, please?
Good afternoon.
It's Beverly Lindsay. But sorry about that. Hello, Beverly. It's nice to have you. Let me just introduce you properly so the listeners know exactly who it is on the line. That's Beverly Lindsay. I have here honorary doctorate, an OBE, a CD, that's from Jamaica, and former Vice Lord Lieutenant of the West Midlands. Thanks for coming online, Beverly. I know how busy you are, so you couldn't be in the studio with us. And to put it frankly and bluntly, you're the one degger woman amongst all us men here today. So we're talking about the vaccination hesitancy. I know you come from a nursing background. Let's hear your take on it, Beverly.
Well, it's nothing new that I'm the one woman amongst men. I'm quite used to being, I was in a group of men group, and I was the only woman out of the group. So it's nothing new. My take on the vaccine, yes, I think taking the vaccine is a very positive and responsible thing to do. We've all, if you look at your left shoulder, you'll see all the little, back home we used to call it little fascia or whatever, scarring that we've had from childhood days taking vaccines. And, our parents made sure that we had it to protect us. And over the years, many of us have been having flu jabs or other things. We go to the doctors and they just, we say something hurting us and they write a prescription and we go and cash it and have it filled and take the medication without question. Mm-hmm. And we take paracetamol. If you look, they have all had side effects. And I don't see this vaccine as any other risk than any other drug that we take in our bodies. When we go to Africa and certain parts in Asia, we have to take some kind of vaccination or some immunization before we can enter those countries. So we have to trust the science.
Okay, so let me ask you, and I'm sure you won't mind me saying that. Your mother is in her 90s.
She's 96, nearly 97.
Has she had the vaccine, both of them, and the booster?
She's had the vaccine.
And you yourself have?
And I've had my vaccine, I've had my booster, I've had my flu jab.
Right, okay. So we're leading by example. It's called pro-social modeling. Let me ask you then, you are in the travel industry, Diamond Travel, which is well known. When people come in to book their flights to go to Africa or the Caribbean or Asia and they've opened up America now, do you give them any advice or ask them, by the way, have you had it for traveling purposes? Do your staff mention that as a passing shot?
Oh, yes. All my staff are very good. Matter of fact, we do more than that. Apart from giving it to them, we send out sometimes on the WhatsApp or email them the information. Whenever they book a flight, even yesterday somebody asked for a quotation for Paris, and we send them the whole list of items they need to do. We sometimes, when they come into the shop, we print out the information. So we not only just tell them, we give it to them in writing, but we also advise them to check on the government, the .gov website to ensure.
Absolutely. I like that bit of advice there about check on the government. Some people say, we can't trust the government. But the government websites, because I have a lot of stuff in front of me here, which I've been reading and mentioning things on. And the government websites and the National Health Service website, of course, as well, clearly explaining in simple terms what this is all about and the importance of it, and the reluctance and the hesitancy has to stop. So, I know time's of the essence and we have two other speakers on, but what would be your final thoughts to leave with viewers and listeners to New Style Radio and Breakthrough TV about those who are still undecided, sitting on the fence, or thinking, oh yes, I've heard a lot to convince me now. What would you say to them?
Take the vaccine. We've had so many. We've lost so many people in our community from this coronavirus.
Absolutely.
Every death I said is one too many.
Yes.
Right? And sometimes young people are selfishly thinking that I don't want the vaccine, I'm not going to take the vaccine. But, they're becoming carriers.
Yes.
And they're giving it to the older people who may have underlying, or younger people too, who may have underlying health issues.
Yes.
And they contract it. They might survive it.
Yes.
So don't be selfish. Don't think about yourself alone. Think about the other people around you. And as I can't think of any of those people who do not want to take the vaccine, never take 2 paracetamols or some other medication.
All right.
Right? You have to trust the science. I have had spinal surgery a couple of years ago, and people are telling me all this. And even when I was going to do surgery, I heard that it's a dangerous. I might not walk again. But I had to trust, because if I didn't have it, I would not be able to walk either. So you have to trust the science.
Yes.
And just like how we take paracetamol, take the vaccine. If it don't kill you, it will cure you, and it's not going to kill you.
Let me put you on the spot here and ask you, what's your take in terms of the church community, especially the black churches and their stance? We're going to have somebody on in terms of his view and what he's noticed at having gone to funerals, etc. But you have any views or thoughts on our black majority churches and their stance on this whole issue?
Well, I can't speak for the church. I know that there are some churches and some ministers who are encouraging people to have the vaccine. And I know that there are some that are hesitant. But if you look at, the people that we've lost in the community, especially in the early part, all over the world too, are church people. I remember there was a church in one of these, Chicago, one of these countries I heard in the early days. One church lost about 20 odd senior ministers because everybody thought they could pray away this thing.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, I've heard that.
And we've lost quite a lot of big, giant church people in the early part because maybe they thought they were covered by the Holy Ghost.
Yes.
Right? There's always, that people say God will provide, and sometimes, God provides in different ways.
Yes.
You hear the story about the man house flooding, and they send a bicycle to rescue him. He didn't go. They send a car to rescue him. Didn't go. The water kept rising. They send a boat. They didn't go because the Lord is going to help him. And then he went up to the room. They sent a helicopter and didn't go. You know what happened? He drowned.
Drowned, yes.
And another thing I say about taking the vaccine, I said, don't be like the 5 foolish virgins, the story in the Bible where they come to the church about the 5 wise virgins and the 5 foolish virgins. Because, because they will miss we'll be going to their funerals. I went to a funeral last week. There's somebody who went into hospital under something else, caught COVID and died. And somebody at the funeral told me that he went to a funeral, 4 funerals the previous week of all young men under 60, and they all died from COVID.
Well, we can't put it penny plainer than that. You've done well, Beverly, in that regard. We have Brian Scott, Pastor Brian Scott, on the line. Thanks very much for coming and giving us your views. We're going to move on quickly now because we have 2 more guests in the studio that we have to try and fit in before we finish at 2:30. Callers, if you do want to call, like how Beverly Lindsay just did, and the other person at the very start of the program, the number is 0121-270-2559. But let's hear Pastor Brian Scott, who is well known at the church upon Soho Road. Let's hear from him. The Baptist Church, Cannon Street Memorial Baptist Church. Hello, Pastor Scott.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Tony, Kelly. How are you doing?
I'm fine. And your good self?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you very much.
Are you out there burying a lot of people? Are you attending a lot of funerals because of this thing?
Unfortunately, we are attending a lot of funerals because of this thing called COVID-19.
And what message are you giving at these funerals when you realize that that is the thing that killed the various people that you're burying? What are you managing to bring anything into the sermon or the preaching or so on to try and instill the black congregation who are attending these funerals that they must go and get themselves vaccinated, or you don't touch it with a barge pole?
No, absolutely. I encourage people to go and get their vaccination. I mean, because you know what our community is like. We're sometimes a bit skeptical and we're a bit suspicious. And I'm encouraging people to go and get their vaccination because it saves lives. As your previous caller just said, I've seen so many young men, when I say young men, under 60, where they've been taken out by the pandemic, and if they'd had their vaccine, I'm pretty certain, I'm not a doctor, but I'm pretty certain that they would have had a good chance of surviving. But most of these people, they'd refuse to take the vaccine for whatever reason, and unfortunately they succumb to the disease.
Yes, you're right, because I'm the secretary of the Jamaican Diaspora UK, and a week does not go by when information doesn't come to me to pass on to the membership about yet somebody else dying. And this is from it started back from lockdown. Every week without fail, something comes through to me. And even Reverend Eve Pitt, who speaks to me probably every fortnight, keeps telling me she's doing on average, like you yourself, Pastor Brian Scott, 3 or 4 funerals per week. And related all to COVID-19. And she says she makes it plain and straight. You must get vaccinated. Okay.
Absolutely.
What else would you like to tell the viewers and listeners? You're on the phone here talking about the hesitance and reluctance and so on.
Well, like I says, it is better to get the vaccination than try and fight this disease or end up in hospital on a ventilator. From my own personal point of view, my mum and dad, they were both sick last month. They were both sick at the same time. And my mum survived, my dad didn't. And
I'm sorry to hear that.
The doctor said, what the doctor says, my mum had her double jab. My father, he wouldn't have any. And the doctor says he died of COVID-19.
Wow.
So I've had it personally, I've got personal experience. I went and saw both of them struggling for life, but my mum pulled through because she had a double jab. Simple as that. But my dad, he refused to have it.
And this
Jamaican.
This is typical of men. We said at the start of the program, I don't know if you were listening then.
Yes,
men are in denial. Men bury their head in the sand like the ostrich. Men think they're macho and manly and virile. And no, I'm immortal, invisible. And there you are giving testament of your father succumbing to the vaccine simply because in Jamaica, they say, he is hard.
And now
sorry to hear that.
Yes, it's very sad, and I just wish he'd listened. The doctors were phoning him, his nurse was phoning him from the practice, and nobody could convince him to take it. So that's an extreme case. But to those who are sort of in the middle and don't know what to do, I would encourage them to take it because we don't know. You don't know who you're going to come into contact with. You don't know who's carrying it, who's not carrying it. So you need that extra protection, that extra layer of protection that it gives you. Yes, it doesn't stop you catching it, but it stops you from getting seriously ill.
Yes.
And that's the point I want to make.
And I like your honesty because we're going to have a speaker in a bit who is going to show us the reverse of what you're saying. At least you've been honest and telling us about what killed your father and some of the funerals you've been to, and it's COVID related. Do stay tuned in to hear somebody else say the complete opposite in terms of their experiences. But thanks for calling in, Pastor Scott. Much appreciated as usual.
Yes.
Keep on doing what you're doing out there, brother.
Try and do my little bit, and you guys keep on doing what you're doing. And
You're
may
welcome.
the Lord bless you.
All right.
Okay. Take care. God bless.
Thank you. Before we have our next speaker, who is in the studio with us, you're hearing the rounds of applause being given. We'll have Gangster's Paradise by Coolio. That's the next on the tracks that we're about to play. Paradise by Coolio. And next we have with us Erwin Sylvester, better known as Soca Master. He's the station manager for New Style Radio and the company secretary and director of the Afro-Caribbean Millennium Center, which is based here where the home of New Style Radio is. He has presented on many different radio stations and is a musician of many years' experience. He worked professionally for 25 years as a marketing manager. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much indeed, Tony.
Now, I'm just going to leave it open-ended for you to tell us. First of all, have you had the vaccinations?
I have had the vaccine.
And the booster as well?
The booster.
Well, why did you decide to have them?
I've also had the flu
as
vaccine.
Well. Good on you. Listeners, viewers, you heard that. Yet another person.
Okay,
Tell us your whole take on why you thought, hang on, this is best for me. And I need, and tell us whatever experiences you have out there you want to share with us.
Okay, then, Tony, once again, I'm really thankful the fact that I can come on today and share some of my experience, right, about this corona thing to the public.
Yeah.
Because on my way out there, I'm constantly meeting people, and we converse and we talk about everyday life. We talk, and we cannot escape talking about the coronavirus, because that is the in thing today. With so many of our people dying, that comes as a natural conversation now, with people. How is your family? How is it? Oh, they're fine. Oh, have you been to so-and-so funeral today? Yesterday? Yes, I have. Me personally, I've been to 5 funerals in 1 week.
Wow.
Right? And of the 5 funerals I went to, one of them, which was one of our presenters from Africa, and we went to the wake and stuff like that, and we had a wonderful time there in respect of his life, celebrating his life. But apart from that one, where the family came out and spoke about him and his demise, and mentioned that the corona took him, and also took another 3 of the same family. Wow. That is the lady, his sister who spoke. So she was demonstrating how real this thing is. And we all know that the thing is real, right? But somehow, we have got in our community, we have got conspiracies, we've got misinformation, so much that it's almost rampant in our community. And it is having an effect on a lot of people out there. People, what I find is that you ask them, you say, have you taken the vaccine? And those who have taken it, the general say, yes, of course I have. Have you? Of course I have. But then the doubters would say, well, I don't know, I haven't taken it, and with a bit of reluctance, I haven't taken it. And I said, well, what do you mean you haven't taken it? Well, I don't know, I'm still waiting to see. So what are you waiting to see? You're waiting to see me as a guinea pig, right, who took it to see if anything will happen to me, right? So my demise depends on you taking your vaccine. I say that is very, very selfish, right? Other people would say, well, I don't trust. I said, who you don't trust? I don't trust the government. I don't trust. I said to them, well, listen to me. Why you don't trust the government? We have a government here, right, in this country. We have a two-pronged government. We have a government and we have an opposition party. And if the government in power does not adhere to the country's, right, or its population's good health, we have an opposition party there who will be glad to jump on it to denigrate the party in power, right? They're called the government's opposition party, and they're paid to be in opposition. Why we just normal ordinary people? We're not politicians, we're not doctors, but somehow we feel that we have more intelligence and medical science than the doctors and the scientists, who some of them spent over 20 years practicing medicine and still practicing. We just learned to read a mobile phone 2 months ago, and we believe that we can send social media a conspiracy all over the world to tell them that they know more than the doctors and the scientists. And that gets me, I feel offended sometimes, like when I hear this. Because I say to some of them as well, I say, listen, are you saying to me, we pay, all of us, we pay a lot of money to, through taxes and other means, to educate our scientists, right, and our doctors. And are you saying to me that that's in vain? Because if we pay all this money for them to be trained, and the government's number one priority, as they always say, is the safety of its people. Yeah. That's number one priority. And the opposition knows that. So if the opposition know that the government is lying to us, are they just sitting back there and not saying anything? What kind of opposition have we got? Because they'll be so glad to do that, to get into power. That's the main aim, is to throw the party in power out so they can get into power. But they just sit back I'm not saying a thing, but we outside here who don't know politics, we're not politicians, we're not medical people. We feel that we know more than, these trained people.
Okay. Well, let me bring this back. Then you said you went to that funeral, and the sister went up and so on and mentioned various other people. But have you been to any others where you've seen the opposite happen?
Oh yes, I've been to five of them. Mm-hmm. You know what? I was very upset. I feel offended by the pastors in the church, knowing that all these people, the funeral I went to, every one of them died of COVID, right? Mm-hmm. And none of them took the vaccines. Mm-hmm. The pastor in the church goes on with his sermons for hours and hours and hours. Yes. And not once did I hear them mention something. I mean, such a unique opportunity, right?
Yes.
With 500-600 people in front of you.
Indeed.
A unique opportunity to make the point and remind the people, listen, there is a pandemic going around. It's dangerous. It's taking life. The very coffin in front of us, it has taken his life. And I'm waiting to hear them say something, right, that will spike the attention of the non-believers. And they didn't. They didn't say a word with regard to, oh, well, our dearly beloved, he died, he succumbed to COVID, and we all know that's the
all right.
going and
so did you then, after whatever, challenge these various pastors? Because I presume these are black pastors at black people's funerals. Did you manage to, in an assertive way, challenge them and say, well, what's going on here? Why is it being kept so hush-hush?
Well, I'll tell you the truth is that the very first one I went to, when I didn't hear any mention, I tried to get to him after the funeral finishes. And Tony, he escaped. Okay. He escaped. He probably must have had an inkling that I would come to him and ask him a few questions. He escaped. The second one I went to, because the people, it was so overwhelming, the crowd. There were probably over 1,000 people there. Okay. And the crowd was so overwhelming, right? And I felt, well, surely, I mean, am I the only one who has that issue with this pastor, that he didn't mention anything at all about, about COVID? And I got cold feet, to be honest with you. You know? And I said, maybe that is because that is the policy of the church. All
right, well, I'm going to give the people listening an opportunity to say, if they go to any of these funerals and they know for a fact the person that they're going to pay respects for died of COVID or the coronavirus, I'm suggesting to them, if they have open tributes, I certainly wouldn't have a problem going up and saying, and I'm so sad to know that this person lying here died of COVID-19 or the virus or whatever. Somebody has to say, it has to be said. I agree with you.
And that's the thing that struck me. Some great friends of the deceased, great friends, went up there and read out the whole autobiography, about that person, right? And not even one word. They said, yes, we were good friends. We used to do everything together. We used to do that. We go there, we did this. But not one mention as to, and he succumbed to COVID.
So it's a matter of, don't mention the war, don't mention the C word. We're not talking C for cancer, we're talking C for COVID. And coronavirus. That's sad, because the perfect opportunity, as you said, with 1,000 mourners there, and trying to get that message across, the perfect scenario for them to be able to address it. And
absolutely.
Like what Pastor Scott has been doing,
that's right.
and I know Reverend E. Pitts does it in her church as well, but sadly. So let me move on then from the sort of funeral and that sort of thing. Traveling. Where does traveling fit into all of this? Because some people are wanting to travel, but don't want to be vaccinated, or some people are reluctantly getting vaccinated because they want to travel. Any thoughts or views on that?
Well, I know most of the islands in the Caribbean, right? They have got this restriction. You must be vaccinated before you can before you can enter. America is the same. So traveling is a big problem for a lot of our people, or anyone who wants to travel, right? Can I just say one more thing? Because for people who are doubtful and still doubting the effectiveness, or even the existence of this COVID thing, I use my family as an example. Because our family, and I mentioned my family's name, Sylvester. We're huge in the community, huge family. And I say, you know what? Let me use my family for example. Because I know almost every one of them who has taken the vaccine and who have not taken them. Right? I said, let me use them as an example and see what the figures are going to be like. And I've had almost argument with a couple of my brothers, and again they were peddling the same conspiracy thing. And brothers from the Caribbean rang them, spoke to them. And still, they continued to be that way until he got it.
Okay.
He got it so bad that when I asked him, I said, how bad is it? He said, if you can imagine. He said, if you can imagine the worst flu you've had, he said, multiply that by 20.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Wow.
And that is the same one who was adamant. That no, he said, I've got all my herbs. And I know, for example, we went to the Caribbean 2-3 years ago. When we came back, he had so much bush from Grenada, right? Bags and bags of it. That when we got to the tarmac, I don't even know how the plane lifted off the tarmac. With all the bushes. So I said to him, I said, well, so what do you think the vaccine is made out of, right? And do you think that your bushes, right? Do you think that your herbs is more important and valuable or powerful than the vaccine? The vaccine, people have got the resources to go any part of the world on this globe, anywhere, to get the best. The Amazon jungle, parts of Asia, where you and I cannot afford to go to, and they go and get the very best. And you telling me that yours is better than theirs. If yours is so good, why aren't you a millionaire? Sell it to the pharmaceutical company, right? And be a millionaire today, instantly. But so these are the kind of things that we are, And I really take my hat off to Beverly, on her hobby as well that she did. Maxie is always very on the ball, with his comments. And I once again, I want to say thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts with people out there. One more thing I'd have to say is that, and we don't want to mention names, but I had an hour and 20 minutes conversation with a young man who again was a doubter.
Hour and 20 minutes, that's a long time.
Hour and 20 minutes. And I said to him, I said, boy, we never spoke so long before. What's this, What's going on? He said, boy, and he's a lovely man, lovely. I mean, we are like brothers, right? And at the end of that conversation, we left. I said, I'm going to send you something. I want you to see how real this thing. And what it is a tracker, an international tracker, tracking every country in the world, right? With every COVID deaths in every country. And I say you can see, go through it, check the flags and go through the different, and you'll see how real that is.
Right.
And that was the last thing I said to him. He now sent me in exchange a conspiracy one, right? To counteract that. He died 8 days after.
Really? Wow.
Right?
These stories they just come on and on and on. Yes.
And Beverly said it as well. How many of these people? Normally, I go to funerals. And I may go to say a funeral once every 2 months or a month. So, and when you go, it's always grown-ups, elder people who live their lives, and
But not anymore. Not these days.
I've been to 5. I got another 3 to go to coming up very soon. And none of these people are 60 years of age.
That viewers and listeners, you've heard that loud and clear.
None of 60.
Yeah.
Right? So we are losing our young folks and people through stubbornness. And I would say stubbornness, conspiracies, and doubters who have polluted the minds,
yeah.
right? Why would our government want to hurt us?
Yes.
Why would they want? Why wouldn't they give us the best medicines? Why wouldn't they?
Yes.
Right? But people out there they still think that way, and that I cannot. And like Maxi, I wouldn't say I'm an educated person, but I think I'm intelligent enough to know right or wrong, to judge my governments and the people around me, to judge their decision and make decisions based on these people. Because I got a lot of educated and intelligent people as well around me, and I take a lot of their books as well.
Well, thanks very much, Orin, Soccer Master, for giving us your thoughts and views on this whole issue. Yet another person who has done the right thing. It's called pro-social modeling, leading by example, and that's to be applauded. And the ones in your family who are still reluctant and so on, they need to take a leaf out of your book. That's what I would say. Thanks for coming in.
You're very welcome.
Right. Our next track is going to be, before I bring on our final guest speaker and then just have an all round up with everybody, our next track is going to be from the Jamaican Folk Singers. The Jamaican Folk Singers, and there is a track called Helena. And I'm going to just read out, while they're getting the track ready, what Helena is about. Jamaica has strong traditions of folk healing by herbs. You mentioned herbs earlier, and other means. Here's one of the most potent healing bushes is the subject. Sorossi is known in Guyana as Corilla bush and has recently been the subject of serious scientific research for use in diseases like diabetes and cancer. This song, called Helena, highlights the danger of careless use of herbs because the young girl obviously does not know Sorossi, and when instructed by her mother to boil some of the tea for her pains, she picks the deadly nightshade, which is poisonous. Let's hear Helena and her mama go ground.
Birmingham's #1 for African arts, culture, and Afro edutainment. 98.7 New Style FM. Birmingham's #1 for African arts, culture, and Afro edutainment. 98.7 New Style FM.
And that was especially for the younger folk, Elena and her Murgal Grown. That's how it's pronounced, Elena and her Murgal Grown, by the Jamaican folk singers led by the late Olive Lewin. That's part of the Jamaican culture and upbringing, etc., that you need to be homed into. As well as the reggae and the ragga and the hip and so on. My final guest before we wrap up together on this program, which we've extended till 3 o'clock because the discussion has been quite informative, is none other than Honorary Alderman Philip Murphy. I'll just give you a bit of potted history about him. He's chairman of New Style Radio and the Afro-Caribbean Millennium Limited here. He worked professionally as a civil servant and served for 20 years as a Birmingham City Councillor, holding several cabinet posts during his period of service. We'll stop there because we could be here all night. Welcome, Philip. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me here, Tony, giving me the privilege of participating. But can I say, we should be thanking you for presenting the program so professionally and so ably and well. I know you're a very busy man, but probably one of the things you can do is to become a New Style radio presenter. You'd be very, very welcome. But also, I want to say some other thanks. We're here not in this, our listeners would know that we're not in the studio, we're in a room next to the studio, and this has been enabled by our able technician, Shannon, whose listeners can't see, but he's here and he's fit up is Breakthrough TV here. So not only are we broadcasting and the radio, we're also transmitting at YouTube, so I want to thank him. And of course, thank Carl with a C, who is also doing some producing and technical work, and no less a person than Fresh Green, who's also a technician. So we want to thank all these people, and also just to say that one of the reasons why we make so much effort to keep this organization going, and in particular New Style Radio, is that it has given us so much power, such power. You've mentioned we're transmitting to 120 countries. Something our listeners might not know is that our greatest listenership isn't in Jamaica or in the United States or in Africa, it's in Ukraine.
Okay.
So it really is important when we say that New Style Radio is very powerful. So hopefully our listeners will continue to support us. We need the support.
Okay. Well, you have some things you want to say, but I have two questions that I want to ask you. I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Absolutely.
The first question is, and I know this for a fact, you have 3 daughters, and they're all medical doctors.
Not all 3 are doctors. One is an historian, 2 are medical doctors.
So, all right, so I stand corrected then. 2 are medical doctors. So you must have had discussions with them within the family and whoever their partners are, if they're doctors as well. What does the family take? And then with your wife Paula as well, what's the family take on this whole conspiracy theory and hesitancy and reluctance? So let's start from that point.
Well, yes, Tony, I can start very much from the point. My youngest daughter is a medical doctor, and she used to work in accidents and emergencies. She's now a general practitioner. But in March 2020, she came up and said, "Dad, you're 72." I think I was 71 then. You're 71. You're an old man now. There is something going around called the coronavirus. And I know you travel on the bus and you travel on the train. You must stop doing that, Dad, because this is dangerous. And I must tell you, and I must admit to my listeners, I thought my daughter was over the top. I thought, of course there's a flu going on. There's SARS, all of these things. They're going to affect me. I hear what you're saying, but I'm more or less going to ignore it and not take it too seriously. This is sometimes in the middle of March, yeah? And I remember she said, "Don't go into shops, Dad," that kind of stuff. Because she was at the coalface experiencing this before most people, because she was in hospital in accident emergency. I must confess, I didn't take it seriously. And I remember traveling on the bus subsequent to her telling me this, and I told her and said, "Dad, I thought I told you not to travel on the bus." And very soon after that, we went into lockdown, and then I started to take it seriously. But there's no question about it. Obviously, I was lucky. Because at my age of 72, traveling as I do on the bus, go to various places, I could easily have contacted that. Because I must say, I didn't take it seriously. Another thing I wanted, so in the family, of course, my eldest daughter she's a psychiatrist, she's a consultant psychiatrist, but she knows about all of this. So, obviously, they warned us, and my wife, and we clearly understood and the significance of it. But one other dimension of this I must tell you, which is so important about vaccination, being vaccinated. My mom, who was 91 in around May, June, became very ill, and we knew she was ill. My wife and myself wanted to travel to Jamaica to see her in September 2020. Because of COVID, we couldn't travel, and we knew she was getting ill. Now, obviously, we got vaccinated with both vaccination, and the moment that Jamaica travel was allowed to Jamaica in May, literally the second day after we were in Jamaica. So what that meant was I was able to see my mom, spend 8 days with her, say my farewells, because I know Mom was dying, and so was my wife. But the interesting thing about this is this. If I wasn't vaccinated, I wouldn't have been able to go. And my mom, who is not a clinging person, when she was told sometimes in May that one of our booking was cancelled, what is Philip waiting for? And my mom isn't a clinging kind of person. She agreed when I was a young man, at 15, for me to leave Jamaica and come to England. So so what I'm saying here is this: my mom held on and wait for me to come to Jamaica, because I saw her, and I came back to England. My wife and myself came back to England, and literally a week after I left Jamaica, Mom died. So it's most important. And another issue I want to mention, at the time, apparently, if you traveled to Antigua, you were able to probably go to Jamaica. People were finding ways of going to Jamaica. Unfortunately for me, my Jamaican passport was out of date, And so I wasn't able to travel. So another important thing for callers, and they would only use a Caribbean passport, is that it's important to get your passport up to date.
Right. Right. Good to hear that. Before you go on into sort of other things you would like to say, I need to ask you, this for some people, and you're into human rights, just like Maxie Hales is, etc., into equal rights and justice and so on. They've announced, I think sometime this week, if the care home workers have not had the vaccination, they will be sacked. They won't have the jobs. And by next year, March, April, by spring, people who have frontline work within the National Health Service, within hospitals, if they too don't have the vaccinations, they will have to leave their jobs. What's your take on that?
Well, obviously, we need to respect human rights, employment rights, but clearly no right is absolute. The greatest rights in the world is the right to life. That's why when we say Black Lives Matter, it's important. Your life matters. And of course, if it's just a matter of taking a vaccine, which we know is safe, we know it's safe, then obviously compared to losing your lives, and most important, affecting other people. Now, this business about your individual choice, I think Wade mentioned it, and incidentally, Wade spoke so well. Obviously, you can't have an individual choice to drive on the wrong side of the street. And there are many, many things you can't do individually. So this business about individual choice is stupidity. You have no right, you have no individual right to infect someone and kill someone else. It's almost like murder. So this is a foolish argument. We live in a society, and there are all kinds of rules which we have got to abide by. No, as they say, no man is an island. So clearly, one has to have a sense of responsibility. And this is connected with what you were speaking about earlier in terms of the churches and the leaders of the churches not telling people that they must protect themselves. If you love your people, if you love black people, if you love your congregation, then you have a duty, you have a responsibility. And it's wicked, and I use the word in the theological sense, it's wicked not to tell your parishioners and your churchgoers that they must protect themselves. Now, I believe, and I think this should be condemned, that this is an act of cowardice. Clearly, New Style Radio, because we're a radio station, we're here to educate and inform and indeed entertain also. So because in a sense we haven't got an axe to grind, we can tell the truth because we are not afraid that people might not listen to us or might not come to our church. The truth is, if you love your people, and let me just say this, in my experience, you mentioned I was a politician, very often I found that when I go up to people's doors and talk to them, and 20 years I've had to go to people's door and talk to them, I've always found that when you tell the people the truth, what you find is that they're way ahead of you. So those church people who believe that their parishioners might not I keep saying parishioner, that their church members might not come up because they tell them the truth. It's not true. This is to underestimate black people, their intelligence and their good sense. What they're doing, they're looking to the church leaders to advise them. So we have got to say clearly to our church leaders, they've got a duty, and if they're not living up to those duties, shame on them.
Yes, those are very valid points you make there. So you saw it within yourself that this is something that needed to be aired, needed to raise awareness, and hence you're putting on this show, having guest speakers in and so on, which has to be commendable because and there's the issue, we'll come on to the end where you're all going to give a little 1 minute summing up, but you've actually had this place used as a vaccination center. How did that come about?
Well, it came about because we've always wanted the center to be used for health purposes, and our local pharmacy, which is literally opposite us, approached us and said to us they would love to use us and work in conjunction with us, and we readily agree and to do this, and it's going very well. We must encourage our listeners to use the vaccination center. It's very important that we do this. But this is again part of what we see as our responsibility to serving people, to do what is in the interest of people. But I want to say something, Tony. Most people know me as a politician. That's my background. But really, my real background isn't in politics. My background is in social sciences. I spent 7 years at the university studying social sciences. And because of that, I want to say something a little about this kind of hesitance, suspicion about the vaccination. And I hope listeners will bear with me. I'll give them a little example from the history of science. In the 16th century, there was a man called Galileo. He's the founder of astronomy, with his telescope. Now, when Galileo built his telescope, he discovered that the planets operated in a very different way from the church believed. And for thousands of years, people had a certain view about planets and the planet's relationship to Earth. And he said that his telescope showed it to them. He had a meeting. It showed it to him. He had a meeting with the leading church people in Rome, and said, "Listen, for you to understand the truth of what I'm saying about the planets and the planets' relation to the Earth, all you need to do is to look into my telescope,
right?
And it will show you exactly what I'm saying."
Evidence.
The church people said to him, to Galileo, "How do I know what is in the telescope is what is really there?" And of course, they threatened to torture Galileo. And just interestingly, Galileo was a bit of a coward, and he recanted his views, but he said silently, I know what I'm saying to you is true. So what I'm getting at is this, Tony, is that there's been a long history of people being ignorant, denying the reality. If someone, for religious reasons, ideological reasons, want to deny it, I'm afraid it's sometimes very difficult to persuade them. That's why we're going to repeat the message. Sucker mentioned his family. I've got a wonderful uncle who brought me up in this country before he went to the United States. Great man, wonderful man. You couldn't find a better human being. But he's a 7 Days Adventist, and he has not been vaccinated, despite the fact that he has a lot of underlying conditions, diabetes, you name it. So there is a dangerous prejudice, and we have got to repeat the message. I told you about being a student of social science. I remember with one of my teachers talking about politics, and us Marxists have this view that in the final analysis the working class is going to take power. So I said to him once when we were discussing these matters, listen, workers may not have power just now, but in the final analysis the workers will take over. And he said to me, and I've never forgotten it, he's now died, but I've never forgotten it, name is Liam O'Sullivan. He said, "Philip, in the final analysis, we're all dead." So what I want to say to you is this. Those people who say they're going to wait and see and they're not sure, in the final analysis, we're all dead. So if you're waiting, you unfortunately, when you're dead, you're not able to say, I regret it. Now, Sucker mentioned, I know of individuals who have died. One person in particular who I really love, great guy, one of the few people who have paid me a compliment. You always say, "Philip, and I love you. You're born in the same part of Jamaica as myself. You're a bad man. You're born in West Kingston." And I love the guy. And this guy died of COVID. And it hurts me. And if he had been vaccinated, I know the wonderful guy would be still with us. So that's the word I want to say. I'm saying to people, if you love your life, if you love the life of your family, if you love those, take the vaccination. Take the vaccination. And since, Tony, you're a churchman, I'll finish by giving you a little story. Again, it comes from the history of philosophy, actually. There is a French, you talk about the French, a Frenchman who said that, listen, the reason you should believe in God is this. If, he said, take the risk. What if you say you believe in God and you die? What have you got to lose? If God doesn't exist, then nothing. But if he exists, and you're not believing in him, you're in trouble. So the thing is, my message to people is, what have you got to lose? You've got nothing to lose.
Yes, because we need to establish, when you look at the figures, every medicine or drug has side effects. Every single one, whether it be Fenzik or Kafanol from our days in Jamaica, or Panadol or paracetamol. Every medication, when you look at the label, it clearly says, oh, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 100,000, 1 in 250,000. There's a risk. Just like when you're going under the knife, general anesthetic, under local anesthetic or general anesthetic, there's a risk that something might go wrong. But that should not be at the forefront of our mind if we're there trying to, because I've seen the pictures on the television and they don't look pretty when you see people struggling for breath and they're on the ventilators and so on, and you see people actually literally dying on the news, and it says, please, I beg you, don't put your family through this. So,
Tony, there are people who have major operations, open heart surgery, kidney, major operation, and they would have no fear of the doctor. These are really intrusive things. The same people have got fears about a little injection, and something which I'm no scientist, but what I can say from hearing Dr. Pedjere speaking, hearing other doctors speaking, I've tried to understand how this vaccine works, and I think I can put it very, very simply. Dr. Pedjere mentioned that the old-time vaccine, they used to give you a little bit of the vaccine to immunize you. It doesn't work this way. All that the present vaccine does, important to emphasize, important that people listen, all it does, it stimulates your natural system to let your system do what it could normally do, but it just stimulates. That's all it does. Yes. There's nothing strange about it. What we should do, we should praise the Lord that we've got scientists who can do this. And what people could understand about science. When I was a student, I was at a university which had lots of engineering students at Southampton University. Something like a third of the university were engineers. And what I learned from my friends is that every single student, in order to graduate, had to make a new contribution to the field of engineering.
Right.
I've never forgotten that. Now, what you've got is millions and millions and millions of people around the world studying science, and they're making a contribution to science. That is why the scientists were able to develop this vaccine.
They weren't working in silos.
There are millions of people working to the level of knowledge. So I want to end by saying, don't be concerned that the vaccine was developed so quickly. The reason for that is that the millions and millions of people around the world studying science, that the level of human knowledge has developed. Finally, I must say, in the 18th century, for example, it was said that a man who was highly educated could be aware of most of the knowledge in the world. Today, the most highly educated person can only know a fraction
of what.
So people shouldn't be worried about science. It's a good thing. Science is there, and it's there to help us.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Philip. What I'm going to do, we're going to play one more track, and then each of my guests who have remained, I'll thank everybody by name eventually, but one more track, and then just a 1 minute summing up from each guest, their final thoughts to leave with you before I wrap up. So the next track we're going to play then is One Love by Bob Marley. We're now coming to the end of this wonderful show that we've had. We have 2 minutes to wrap up, and I'm going to ask each of my guests, starting with Maxie Hales, to just 30 seconds to give us your final thoughts on the coronavirus, etc., and the vaccine.
Say when.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Basically, it's there's so much at the time, although you extend it, it's not enough. Philip, I'm glad you mentioned a bit about God. Because the thing about it, I noticed on television when a lot of people recovered from the coronavirus, I always there on my settee saying, just pumping, say, thank God.
Yes.
And God never seems to come in for them. But I just think everybody has done wonderful today. All right?
Okay, that's fine. And next we have Soca. It's just Erwin Sylvester.
Yes.
A couple of...
My final thoughts on this subject is what come to my mind right now is a a situation where a nurse had 22 patients in the hospital, and most of them were black, and every one of them were infected with the coronavirus. And when they were telling the parents, when the parents come to see them in these ICU units, Mommy, as soon as you see these things finish, I want to go get my vaccination.
That's a good note.
And that resonates with me a big.
And last but by no means least, Philip Murphy.
Tony, thanks in 30 seconds, just to say once again, thank you, Tony, for doing such an excellent
You're welcome.
job. We do this because we believe Black Lives Matter, and we will continue to do it. If this program have saved one life, then it will be well worth it. Thank you very much, Tony.
Okay, and I'd like to also thank the other people who were on the program, apart from you three here in the studio, Dr. Matthew Pajoric, Wade Lynn, Beverly Lindsay, and of course, Pastor Scott, who rang in. I should have mentioned Justin Varney. Dr. Justin Varney was due to come, but he had other engagements, couldn't fit in. He's the Director of Health within Birmingham City Council, and also Councillor Paulette Hamilton, who was unable to be with us for other reasons. But thanks everybody for listening. Hope you've got something from it, and go take the vaccine. That's what I say to you loud and clear. All right?
Birmingham's #1 for African arts, culture, and Afro edutainment. 98.7 New Style FM.
Is sponsored by ACMC 339 Dudley Road, New Style Radio 98.7 FM, Breakthrough Studios, and Reggae Jam Jam.
Planning an event? Do it professionally. Please contact Breakthrough Event Management Team and get everything under one roof for both indoor and outdoor occasions, birthday parties, bridal and baby showers, anniversaries, funerals, backyard BBQs and more. We offer a video and photography service, marquees, decoration and a PA system to hire, with popular New Style Radio DJs spinning old and new school hits. Please contact 07584 197 380 and book all your catering needs with Reggae Jam Jam catering service on 0787 244 3765. And remember, do it good and done.